Please join me in giving Dr. Andrew Bernstein a warm Pachyderm Club welcome.
People hear me talk, and their initial response is, "Oh, you must be from Alabama," and everything. But I just want to disabuse anybody of that notion. I am from the South, but it's South Brooklyn. A bastion of the Democratic Party for I hate to say, for a very long time. Although, all of us supporters of freedom, we'll see what we can do about that. Now, I didn't come here to bash the Democrats. I came here, although they certainly deserve it, but I came here to praise capitalism, and that's my purpose. And the whole reason, or certainly the fundamental reason, if I was going to bash the Democrats, would be because they are relentlessly pushing us towards socialism. It's even before the Obama administration, but it has accelerated since. But notice something. If you go back historically, Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, writing in the mid-19th century, claimed that socialism would outproduce capitalism, that the socialist system would produce more wealth and spread it more widely through a society than the capitalist system would. And I'm a Cold War kid. I look around the room. I see some people who I think remember, with not a lot of fondness, the former, unlamented Soviet Union and the dangers it posed to us. But I remember when I was a kid, Nikita Khrushchev. It's interesting the way the memories from your childhood stay with you. The first president, and I'm sure everybody here knows the term POTUS, your president of the United States. I like that term. The first guy I remember as POTUS was John Kennedy, and I'm not a big fan of the Kennedys, but it's interesting that early 20th century, mid-20th century, the Democratic Party still produced some people who were actually concerned to defend the United States. Harry Truman, John Kennedy, recognized the horrors of communism. FDR at least recognized the horrors of fascism. The Democratic Party was at least willing to defend America to some degree back then. Not anymore. I don't think anybody in this room has confidence in Barack Obama's willingness to defend the United States against the jihadists. But I can remember when Kennedy was president, early 60s. Nikita Khrushchev, of course, was the Soviet premier. And remember, some of you probably remember Khrushchev's famous line, "We will bury you." And at the time I was a kid, the Soviets had nuclear weapons. It certainly was a great danger. And I was thinking, as a child, does he mean bury us with, nuclear bombs? Years later, when I was studying philosophy and I studied Marx and Engels, I realized that no, Khrushchev was saying, as a good Marxist, he was saying that we, the socialist system, we will bury you in the quality and the quantity of our consumer goods, that we're going to outproduce you, that socialism will outproduce capitalism. Now, it didn't happen. It's not happening. North Korea is the perfect example of what a socialist, fully socialist system looks like. The abject, abysmal poverty and widespread slavery of that society. And as the United States moves from capitalism to socialism, our levels of productivity decline as well. And yet, look, let's put it this way, economically. And last night I lectured, for the local Bastiat Society, and thank you to Raul Brito for bringing me in to do that. And Frederick Bastiat, of course, a brilliant French economist or economic journalist, and lecturing on my degrees in philosophy, not on economics, but I know enough economics to know that you could put it this way: regarding the economic contest between capitalism and socialism, the contest is over. The scores are on the board. The game is over, right? Economically, it's no contest. Capitalism produces vast amounts of wealth, creates a vast middle class, so that the wealth is spread throughout large segments of society. Socialism creates poverty. I don't think anybody who's familiar with even the rudimentary principles of economics wants to challenge that in the 21st century. And yet we keep moving towards socialism. It's astonishing. We're being dragged or pushed towards socialism despite the fact that economically the Marxist prediction, the socialist prediction, has been proven utterly mistaken. There's not a shred of evidence to support their position anymore. The evidence is all on the other side. We keep being pushed towards socialism. Why is that? The reason is because despite the Marxist claim that socialism would economically outproduce capitalism, that was never the main argument for socialism, never was and is not now. The argument the argument in support of socialism has always been on moral grounds. The argument has always been morally, and if we're going to defend freedom, if we're going to defend capitalism, we're going to defend America against the socialists, we need to take up that challenge and fight this battle on moral grounds. So I want to make in very essentialized terms, and in the brief amount of time I have, I want to make the essential case, the moral case for capitalism here. Now, one thing of many that I learned from Ayn Rand, that I know that from reading her books, I know that many of you have read The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and if you haven't, I strongly recommend you to do so, is that the moral is the practical. There are people who don't believe that, who think that in order to succeed, either as an individual or as a society, you have to rob, cheat, steal, you swim with the sharks or you're eaten by them kind of mentality. And that's just flat out false. In order to gain commercial success and or personal happiness at a personal level or at a national level, we need to enact the strongest moral principle. We need to be morally principled. We need to be honest, truthful, responsible for our own lives, hardworking and honest. The moral is the practical. So I want to make the moral case for capitalism and then show that that is the practical case. Now let me start out by doing what's so rarely done in political discourse. I'm actually going to define my terms. Right? You notice how often, or how rarely that's done. By capitalism, I mean one thing and only one thing, and that is the system of individual rights. Right, that capitalism is the system of individual rights. To put it simply, your life belongs to you. Your life does not belong to the state. Your life belongs to you. That's the system that I'm concerned to uphold, defend, protect. As Ayn Rand defined capitalism, it is the system of individual rights, including property rights, in which all property is privately owned. Your life belongs to you. I think we could teach that to young children and drive that point home. Now socialism, and notice the capitalism's not a good name for the system. By the way, the proper name is liberalism, and I want to reclaim that term. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. I hate to admit it to this group, but I went to grade school and high school with Chuck Schumer. You can forgive me for that. I didn't like him even as a kid, but and I certainly didn't vote for him. But he's not a liberal. They don't deserve the term liberal. LIB, the root is liberty. The supporters of liberty. We're the true liberals here. The supporters of individual rights. The supporters of liberty. A long time ago, the great Chinese philosopher Confucius said, "See to it that things are called by their right names." These guys, they're welfare statists, or they're just statists, or they're semi-socialists, or half-ass socialists. But they're not liberals. We are liberals. So capitalism, the term is coined by Marx, right? Meaning it's the system in which the men of capital, the wealthy, dominate the poor. They dominate the poor, starving workers in the economic transaction. The very name capitalism has a Marxist conception of class struggle packed into it. The proper name here is liberalism. Be that as it may, socialism is a proper name because what it means is your life has been socialized. Your life belongs to society. Your life belongs to the state. That's the essence of socialism. And full socialism, of course, not what we see in the United States today or in Scandinavia, but full socialism, communism, National Socialism, which is again well named, and I don't ever use the term Nazi because the right name is National Socialism, and it should be pointed out that this is an utterly socialist phenomenon. Under Hitler and his crowd, your life belonged to the state. National Socialism, or as they called it, German Socialism, fascism, these are fully socialist systems. Your life has been socialized, it belongs to the state. Now notice in the modern world today, in the Western world, most of the countries, including the United States, are mixed economies. It's a complete misconception in the 21st century that many people think that the United States is basically a capitalist system, and Scandinavia is, and European countries are basically socialist. That's completely false. We're all mixed economies. There's not that much difference today between the United States and European countries. I regret to state, and we were moving in that direction even before the Obama administration, which is just accelerated. Notice, for example, in Scandinavia. Now, I'm a philosopher, not an economist, so we have some economists here. If I make an error here, you could correct me. But as I understand it, say in Sweden, look at all the elements of individual rights that are still there. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the borders are open, you could get out. It's not the Soviet Union, they won't shoot you if you try and get out. In the economic realm, Volvo, privately owned, operated for profit. Saab, privately owned, operated for profit. Ericsson, privately owned, operated for profit. You walk down the streets of Stockholm, there's all these stores and shops, butcher, baker, candlestick maker. Privately owned, operated for profit. There's a great deal of individual rights there, along with an enormous amount of government control of individual lives. And in the United States, it's not a capitalist system, hasn't been since the turn of the 20th century. Look at all the elements of socialism. First of all, first, foremost, and always, there are the government schools. And public schools are a euphemism. We have to stop using that term. I lectured yesterday at Collegiate. Collegiate's open to the public. These are government schools. The government taxes you to finance them. It doesn't matter whether you have kids to use them or not. They steal your money to support them. They drag these poor kids through compulsory education to go to school. It was modeled in the mid-19th century after the German schools, where the kids were taken away from their parents without any, the parents didn't have to give permission, and were dragged into the government schools in Germany to teach them essentially that their life belonged to the state, that their life belonged to the German nation, not to themselves, not to their families. The government schools in this country were based on that. And I think the thing we need to most desperately do is, if we're going to save our country, I think the thing that desperately we need to do is to privatize the educational system. I think the same way we needed to abolish slavery. Yeah, thank you. I think the same reason we needed to abolish slavery, I think we need to abolish government schooling. It is simply a cesspool of indoctrination that your life belongs to the state in some way, shape, or form, not to yourself. Private education in this country prior to the imposition of government schooling in the mid-19th century was superb. You could look at the history here. It was outstanding. By the way, one point on this before I go on. Ted Kennedy, of all people, his office, I was roughly 1990, I saw a memo released from Senator Kennedy's office that in Massachusetts, the state, not surprisingly, that gave us government education in this country. I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like, in 1850, just before the imposition of government schooling in Massachusetts and in the United States, the literacy levels in the state of Massachusetts, I don't remember the exact number, it was something like 97%, or it was some extraordinarily high number. And Ted Kennedy's office stated that it's never been that high since. So I mean, that's just one example of what private education in this country was like before the mid-19th century imposition of government schooling. So most of the Western societies today, including the United States, are mixed economies. Now, when I talk about the moral case for capitalism, I'm talking about real capitalism. I'm talking about laissez-faire. I'm talking about the system that upholds individual rights across the board. As Ayn Rand puts it, that bans the initiation of force, not just by private criminals, but above all, bans the initiation of force by the government. And the founders of the American Republic did a very good job of putting that Lockean, that principle of John Locke of limiting the power of the state, of putting it into practice, of limiting the power of the state relative to individual citizens. So the moral case for capitalism is very simple. It is the only system that recognizes, upholds, respects, and protects your right to your own life. It is the system of individual rights. If you understand that, your life is sacred. And we need to fight the battle on these terms. So I use my daughter as an example. My ex-wife and I adopted a little girl from China. We got her out of a totalitarian state and into a country that was a free country at one time and is slowly moving towards, not so slowly anymore, but moving towards socialism. But anyhow, let's say, for example, she's 11 and a half now. Let's say she wanted to be a dancer. In a free country, of course, that recognizes that, as Ayn Rand puts it, values are the meaning of life. Values are the meaning of life. Your values, whatever you hold dear, whatever you love, what brings passion or purpose or meaning into your life, in terms of whether it's in terms of your education, your career, or your close friends, or romantic relationship, or your children, or whatever it is, what brings meaning into your life, under the system of individual rights, your right to pursue whatever it is you want is recognized, it's respected, it's upheld. So if my daughter wants to be a dancer, she is free to take the actions to pursue her dream. And this is sacred. And the socialists completely reject that. It doesn't matter what you want. So let's say my daughter Penny, let's say she tests well on science scores under socialism, and the socialist state deems it necessary to have more physicians, more MDs. So they tell her, "You're going to medical school." And she says, I don't want to go to medical school. I don't want to be an MD. And the socialist regime says to her, "Who the hell asked you?" Just not. That's their attitude. Doesn't matter what you want, your dreams, your aspirations, your hopes, goals, what you want out of life. It doesn't mean anything. The state comes first, foremost, and always. You have to serve the state. The Khmer Rouge, the Cambodian communists, put this perfectly, and it's hair-raising, it's chilling, but we need to know this. Their motto was, losing you, quote, is losing you is no loss. Keeping you is no specific gain, unquote. I mean, it's just chilling. It just sends chills down my spine. The individual means nothing to the socialists. Your life means nothing. Your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations, your goals, what you want to do with your life, it means nothing. We'll kill you if necessary. It means no more than stomping a beetle. That's what full socialism is like. It's just... But the truth is, every individual's life is sacred. We need to recognize this and fight the political battles on these grounds. Your life is sacred. It belongs to you. That's the moral case for capitalism. The principle of individual rights. This is where we need to fight the moral battle against the collectivist. I think the Obama re-election in 2012 was enormously disheartening to me and to everybody in this room. I truly expected a Reagan-Carter landslide in 2012. I thought the American people had seen up close and personal what socialism looked like and would have rejected it the same way they rejected Jimmy Carter in 1980. It didn't happen. And it was crushing to me because it showed me. I'm not sure about this, but it makes it possible to raise this for the first time. It's possible that for the first time in American history, a full 50% of the electorate supports socialism. It's possible. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the next round of national elections proves that wrong. But Obama was so bad that it's just staggering to me that he was reelected. It's just astonishing. But the battle's not over yet. We're still sufficiently free. And if the NSA, if you're listening to us, we are the resistance. Right. Even with the NSA listening, and even with the Obama administration trying to send FCC commissioners into the newsrooms to help the news agencies decide what stories are newsworthy and what stories are not newsworthy. Even with these baleful signs of statism, and the increasing power of the state over our individuals, we're still free enough to speak out. And so we have to, as long as the First Amendment is still upheld, we have to take advantage of it and speak out. That's the moral case for capitalism, the protection of individual rights against the socialist system or the statist regimes in which your life or my daughter's life or any individual's life means nothing. We're just fodder to serve like cattle, to feed the needs of the state. Notice how this leads directly into the practical case for capitalism. Now, I know the Atlas Shrugged movie just left town. A lot of people have read Atlas Shrugged, and if you haven't, I strongly recommend that you do. But in Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand dramatizes her theme that this, human intelligence, is mankind's means of survival. That every species has some means by which they survive in this world. The birds have wings to fly. The lions have claws and fangs to rend their prey. The antelopes have foot speed to outrun the lions. We can't do that. Let's see by show of hands, how many people would want to try outrunning a hungry lion? It's like, so no thanks. We can't survive by those kind of physicalistic means. This is our means of survival. Man is an intelligent being. It's not to say human beings always act intelligently, but this is our means of survival. Every value human life depends on is a product of the reasoning mind. Food, and we I gotta say, we are proudly, as Americans, we are proudly the fattest people in history. It's a great thing to be an American. I have to lose 20 pounds myself, but I understand. There are health issues concerned with being overweight. But they're not the same kind of things as losing your son or daughter at age 3 to starvation, right? It's not the same kind of health issues. We have produced an enormous amount of wealth. Here I am in Kansas. As an American, I live to eat. I'm in Kansas. I have to take time to thank the farmers of this country who have grown this enormous amount of food, created this enormous amount of wealth. Food has to be grown, and it requires knowledge of the reason. Like 2% of the American population is farming, and produces this enormous cornucopia of foodstuffs. You go anywhere in the country, the supermarkets are just filled with food. What makes that possible? Well, we've made tremendous advances in agricultural science and agricultural technology. Right? Perhaps the greatest agricultural scientist of history, George Washington Carver at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, many other American agricultural scientists. John Deere, great agricultural technologist who took the new steel being made in the 19th century and started making steel plows, greatly enhanced the production of food. We've made enormous advances in agricultural science and agricultural technology, and that is a product of the reasoning mind. Medicine to cure diseases, and I saw the other day there was the first reported case of Ebola in this country, which is ominous. But the good news is it's not the 14th century when the bubonic plague swept through Europe and slaughtered tens of millions. We've made enormous advances in medicine. Hopefully, could come up with a vaccine or some way to treat Ebola, if God forbid there was ever an outbreak of it. In this country, but again, medical science is a science. It requires knowledge of biology, and again, is a product of the reasoning mind. The houses, the school buildings, the offices, the factories, the hospitals, etc., have to be designed, which requires knowledge of architecture, and engineering, and mathematics. Again, the reasoning mind. I can go on and on with the examples, but Rand's point here, of course, is every value that human life depends on is a product of the reasoning mind. Now, the related point in Atlas Shrugged, her related theme is, well, does the reasoning mind require some political economic condition in order to fully function? Or can it function under any political economic system? Can it function as fully and effectively in North Korea? It's not funny, I shouldn't laugh. In North Korea, under that brutal Stalinist regime, as it could say in the United States? Obviously not. The full functioning of the creative mind requires a specific political economic condition. It requires freedom. It requires the principle of individual rights. Let me put it to you this way. If your life belongs to you, then your mind belongs to you. And you are free to think, to speak, to lecture. Your freedom of intellectual expression is guaranteed, is protected. You're free to think of new theories, write books, give lectures, develop new ideas, new methods, new means of doing things, new technologies, new industries, etc. So if your life belongs to you, your mind belongs to you. And mankind's survival instrument is liberated. Conversely, if your life belongs to the state, then your mind belongs to the state. And the only thinking you're permitted to do is that which is congruent with the dictates of the state. The only thinking you can do is that which the state permits you to do, that which Stalin or Hitler or Mao or some murderous bastard like that permits you to do. Pardon my language here. But Stalin, Hitler, and Mao deserve it. It's the worst mass murderers of history, as you know. So capitalism liberates the creative mind. It liberates all, let's put it this way. Under the system of individual rights, the best members of mankind, those who choose to use their minds, those who choose to use their intelligence, the best members of mankind, their rights are protected, upheld, and respected. And consequently, notice then, this is the main reason why capitalism, and only capitalism, only the system of individual rights, creates this vast amount of wealth in every arena that you could dream of, making human life enormously better. Look at the history here. The United States is the freest country of history, especially after 1865, when the 13th Amendment ended slavery in this country, which had never have existed in this country. It completely contradicts the principle of individual rights the country was founded on. But at least it was abolished. As you know, slavery still exists legally all over the world. North Korea, almost the entire country is a slave state. Sudan, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of slaves. I remember when I was researching this 10, 12 years ago, I was horrified. You could go to the slave markets in Khartoum, in Sudan, and 10, 12 years ago, you want to buy a slave? It was $80 US. That's how much a human life is worth. But not here anymore. Now notice something. In the South, post 1865, the Jim Crow laws were the legal segregation of the races were imposed. Again, another legacy of the Democrats. The lynchings, the brutal murders of any number of innocent black Americans in various southern states. I couldn't say the southern states were free, but the northern states, there were no Jim Crow laws. There was no legally enforced racial segregation. There was no legal lynchings. I think we could say this: the northern states of the United States, late 19th century, before I hate to say it, but Teddy Roosevelt certainly helped push us towards start the impetus towards socialism. Before the progressive era in the early 20th century, and the country started to be pushed towards socialism, there was roughly a 40-year window from 1865 to call it 1904, when Teddy Roosevelt, when the Supreme Court under Teddy Roosevelt broke up Northern securities. So roughly 40-year window of the freest period of the freest country in history. This is when the United States really was a capitalist system. What happened? The American historians call it the Gilded Age, as if corruption were the dominant essence of the period. Is that true? No. Look, you want to know the essence of late 19th century America? In my book, The Capitalist Manifesto, I had to take it upon myself as a philosopher to correct the errors of the historians. Late 19th century America, no longer to be referred to as the Gilded Age. It is now to be known as the inventive period, and you could tell the historians I said so. Notice, Thomas Edison and the development of the electric lighting system, Alexander Graham Bell and the invention of telephone technology, the Wright brothers and the birth of the aviation industry, and the first flight here. Then notice something here. Let's say it's November 1903, right before the Wright brothers first flew at Kitty Hawk, the first manned, powered, heavier-than-air flight in human history. 1903, December, the Wright brothers fly. Less than 66 years later, July 20th, 1969. Some of us can remember that date. What happened on July 20th, 1969? Yeah, the Eagle has landed, right? The Apollo 11 lands on the moon. Think about that. Fewer than 66 years from Kitty Hawk to the moon. This used to be a great country, man. This used to be a great country. and it can be again. And I'm very glad to see the privatization of the space industry and American companies, beginning to explore space. That's exciting. But anyhow, the Wright brothers, the self-educated bicycle mechanics, self-educated regarding aeronautic engineering, late 1890s and early 1900s, they're researching the development of the aviation industry. In architecture, look at the birth of the skyscraper, the distinctively American contribution to the field of architecture. In Chicago, 1870s, after the Great Fire, you start to see the architects building up, not just out. What makes that possible, of course, one of the things that makes that possible is the inexpensive production of steel. Skyscrapers use a lot of steel. If steel was expensive, they'd be prohibitively expensive. Who was responsible for the enormous production of steel, raising the supply of steel relative to demand for steel to such a height that the price of steel came way down? That terribly berated robber baron, Andrew Carnegie, one of the great productive geniuses of history. And notice something here. Carnegie, of course, was a Scot, penniless Scottish immigrant to the United States as a child, but he was an abolitionist. During the Civil War, he worked with the Union Army. He'd been working for the Pennsylvania Railroad. He was building telegraph lines for the Union Army in Virginia, collapsed from a combination of overwork and heat frustration. And after he made his fortune, every summer, which he did at a very young age, every summer he'd return to his native Scotland, which was much cooler. And when he was in Britain, he saw the Bessemer process for making steel, being in operation in Britain. It's funny. Some of the leading metallurgists of the 19th century criticized the Bessemer process. They said it's untried, it won't work, it's crazy. For those of you who've read Atlas Shrugged, it's reminiscent of the State Science Institute's criticism of Reardon Metal. But Carnegie is like an Ayn Rand hero, seeing with his own eyes, understanding with his own mind, a man of independent judgment. Carnegie did what's so difficult to do. He saw the future. He saw that the new steel method was going to replace iron. He came home, he bought out his partners, he tore down his iron foundries, he went into production using the Bessemer process of making steel, and he proceeded to produce enormous quantities of steel, increasing the supply of steel relative to demand, bringing the price down, making skyscrapers possible, and also, of course, at the turn of the 20th century, let's put it this way, late 1890s, here's a farm boy, from the rural areas of Michigan, working as a machinist in Detroit by day, at night tinkering with making a car in a rented garage. I'm talking, of course, about Henry Ford. Now, Ford didn't invent the automobile. There were guys on both sides of the pond prior to Ford who were tinkering with automobiles. Leave it to a Democrat, Woodrow Wilson, to be derisively referred to the automobile as a rich man's toy. You always gotta criticize the rich. You can't be a bona fide Democrat unless you attack the rich, right? Otherwise your credentials, your Democratic Party membership gets torn up and thrown away. You gotta criticize. You gotta attack the rich. It's mandatory. But back then, late 1890s, a few rich guys had cars and they raced them. It was a toy. Henry Ford, again, like Carnegie, saw the future. These weren't just toys. The automobile was going to revolutionize personal transportation in this country. And of course, Henry Ford proceeded to manufacture enormous amounts of automobiles at a very low price so that millions and millions of Americans could buy automobiles. Much better way to travel around than a horse and buggy, especially if it's like 0 degrees or something outside. And part of what made that possible, again, was Carnegie's production of steel. That inexpensive steel made that possible. And notice under capitalism, the way innovations build upon innovations. And the other thing that made it possible for Henry Ford to revolutionize personal transportation in the United States was Rockefeller. Rockefeller at Standard Oil matched, in his production of oil, matched Carnegie, barrel of oil for ton of steel. And Rockefeller's mass production refined so much oil. Again, the supply of petroleum products relative to demand for petroleum products was so high that the price came way down. Including for gasoline. I don't know what the price of gasoline was in the early 20th century, but it was low. And again, that enabled Henry Ford to revolutionize the field of personal transportation. And it's really fascinating the way innovations in a free society and a free market, build upon innovation. Oh, by the way, Elisha Otis in New York and the invention of the elevator also made possible, the development of skyscrapers. Now, I can go on and on with this, but if America is recognized at all, it has been recognized to some degree, not enough, but to at least some degree, as a land of tremendous technological development. In the fields of applied science, technology, industrialization, America has excelled to some degree, has been recognized. Even Charles Beard, famous American historian, who was no friend to capitalism, points out, that in the late 19th century, from the end of the Civil War in 1865 to the turn of the 20th century, not a single year went by that didn't see some extraordinary engineering or technological advance in this country during the inventive period, during the freest period of America's history. Of course, you had the freedom, the principle of individual rights that liberated the Edisons and the Wright brothers and the Bells and George Eastman, who revolutionized the photography industry. You can go on and on with these examples. But I want to go broader than this, because Ayn Rand's point is, the principle of individual rights liberates the human mind across the board in every area of human endeavor, not just in applied science, technology, and industrialization, including in the humanities. So let's look at literature, for example. In the 19th century, the United States was a very young country with a very small population, and yet it produced a body of national literature that's second to nobody. And I'm talking about Nathaniel Hawthorne, Edgar Allan Poe, Walt Whitman, Herman Melville, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Mark Twain. Of course, you can start with Benjamin Franklin, but Mark Twain, and continuing into the 20th century with such great novelists as William Faulkner, not one of my favorite writers, but a writer of great power, Ernest Hemingway, of course, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I would argue the still underappreciated Russian immigrant Alyssa Rosenbaum, better known as Ayn Rand, who I think has written the two greatest novels in the history of world literature, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. In psychology didn't exist as a science in the 19th century. It's created in the 19th century by two men. Freud in Vienna, who, however crazy Freud might have been, revolutionized the field of clinical psychology, and William James in the United States, who I wrote my doctoral dissertation on. William James, who in the field of cognitive psychology or experimental psychology in the 1880s at Harvard University has the first research lab in psychology regarding cognitive psychology. In 1890 publishes his massive 2-volume Principles of Psychology, considered by many psychologists today to be the greatest work in the field, in every field. Where the film industry, where was the film industry created? In the United States, actually in New York City. The film moguls in the early 20th century moved to California to escape regulation. How's that for an irony? Nobody in their right mind is going to California today to escape regulation. But it's funny. I know. 100 years ago, LA was the Wild West. It was wide open. And then of course, I criticize Hollywood all the time, and properly so. These wealthy corporations who are helping push us towards socialism. Nevertheless, Hollywood does make some good movies every year. There were some excellent movies that come out of Hollywood. Anyway, the film industry is born in the United States. The mass publishing industry, born in the United States. This capital is still New York City, where any book on any topic imaginable can be published in this country. And today, with the technology, if you're well out of the mainstream, you could self-publish it. You could publish it as an ebook, or using print on demand, could publish hard copies. You could sell it on Amazon, which prides itself on selling every book that's published. You can market it on Facebook. I mean, the freedom that still exists in the American society liberates every type of thinker, including any crackpot you can mention is free to publish, and as crackpots should be free. No, what's that? Yeah, well, this is America. Crackpots are welcome, you know. It's free. Individual rights is crackpot lib, right? I mean, everybody. But it reminds me. Remember that movie with Woody Harrelson, The People Against Larry Flint? And Larry Flint he's a disgusting creature, but he's a smut peddler. But he says there's an important line in The People versus Harry Flint, where Woody Allen, as the smut peddler, says, quote, "If the First Amendment protects even dirtbags like me, it protects everybody." I mean, that's a good point. So the publishing industry, where was the music industry created? In the United States. Now, again, innovations build upon innovations. Edison invented the phonograph. Now, Marconi, who invented the radio, was a European, not an American. But where did Marconi go to commercialize radio? Well, he came to the commercial center of the world. He came to the United States. And if I remember correctly, RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, was founded on Marconi's American patent to the radio. And notice then that musicians could now make money. You could have music played on the radio, you could sell records to be played on the phonograph, and the music industry is born. And something else about RCA, David Sarnoff, who ran RCA through the 20s and through the Depression, Sarnoff, even though this is the Radio Corporation of America, Sarnoff did what a few other entrepreneurs have done under capitalism. He saw the future. He recognized that the future of American entertainment was not radio primarily, but television. Philo T. Farnsworth, that's a great name, isn't it? Philo T. Farnsworth, an American kid from Utah, had perfected the technology for the television. Sarnoff at RCA saw that television was the future. Even in the depths of the Depression, he founded NBC, developed content for television, such as it is, but developed content for television, and of course, after World War II, we saw the birth of commercial TV in this country. It's ironic because I've lectured in Europe any number of times. This may come as a surprise to you, but European intellectuals don't like America. I know that's a surprise, you know. I know that's a surprise. But they will criticize America in one breath, and then in the next breath talk about the American sitcoms on TV, because all programming on Norwegian television is American TV shows, which they love. So I mean, I could go on and on with.
Bernstein, could you take a few questions?
Yeah, I could go on and on with this. So just let me wrap it up. Notice then the moral is the practical. Once you protect individual rights, you liberate the human mind, mankind's survival instrument, and you create this vast amount of wealth in any area you want to name. The inventive period of American history shows this. In every area, material and intellectual wealth created under capitalism to greatly enhance human life. And so let me conclude with this. Ayn Rand's famous line, well, maybe not famous, but should be famous, that fundamentally, what the have-not nations of the world have not is political economic freedom. The have-not nations of the world don't need our money. What they need are our political principles. But we have to embody them ourselves in the United States. We can't help anybody around the world if we move to socialism. If we stand up and support capitalism and reenact capitalism in this country and create enormous amounts of wealth, we could say to the people in Cambodia or Ghana or Colombia or wherever, this is the way you institute the principle of individual rights. Protect the best members of your society, those who choose to use their minds, and stand back and watch the great minds in any society create enormous wealth across the board, in material and in the intellectual sphere. So thank you.